Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Beagles Games Guitars. In today's video, I'm going to be checking out my favorite Uwe Rosenberg games. Alrighty guys and gals, I'm going to start this video off with my top 5 Uwe Rosenberg games, but before we get to the top 5, I'm going to give you 2 runner-up games that I didn't think quite made the top 5 but are still really good and some of my favorite games. The first runner-up, which is number 7 on my list of top Uwe Rosenberg games, New York Zoo. So New York Zoo came out a couple of years ago, and it's one of his polyomino games where you're basically putting these Tetris piece tiles down on a player board along with other people. And this one didn't quite make my top 5 cut because I'm not a really big polyomino person. I do enjoy the other games that he has made that are polyomino, Cottage Garden, Indian Summer, and Spring Meadow, along with a little bit of Feast for Odin. But it, as its main core mechanic, is not something that I'm looking for in a game, but it's still fun. My wife loves it, and it's a quick and easy game to set up. And the next runner-up, number 6, is actually going to come in 2 boxes because this is with the expansion. And a lot of people will be shocked, but number 6 is A Feast for Odin. There's a reason why it's number 6, and you'll find out later in my list. But this is, of course, a big sandbox game that everybody knows and loves very well, so I don't think I have to talk too much about it. But a game further up on my list scratches all the itch that this one has, plus a little bit more. This one is a big game. It is a really big table hog. That's not necessarily why I dislike it, as you'll find out on my list, but there's just something else on my list that I like a little bit better. Alrighty, now we're getting into the top 5. So for each of these top 5s, I'm going to have 3 pros and 3 cons, kind of describing what I like and, of course, what I dislike, because not every game's perfect. My favorite game is not a Uwe Rosenberg game, so these are just some reasons that I like and dislike all 5 of these games. So I'm starting the top 5 list off today with a small one that's been reprinted, so this is a new edition of this game, and that is Glass Road. I do enjoy me some Glass Road. The main thing that I like about it is that it's fast and easy to set up. There's not much rules overhead. The hardest thing to understand in this game is how to win. Once you understand the wheel mechanic, it's actually really easy, and that's another cool thing about it. I don't see any other games that have that particular wheel mechanic, let alone 2, where every time you don't have a resource on the right side of the wheel, it'll slide up and then you make another resource. So as you're building these other resources and you're getting more of them, you're also getting more of another kind of resource, and that's really cool. And then it's different from game to game because of the buildings. There's different buildings that come out each time, so then you kind of have to strategize when they come out how to get them and how they're going to help you, so not every game is the same. The things that I don't like about it can be the card play. So you in a 2-player game, if you both reveal the same card, then man, they just stole your turn. You really needed to take the second action. I haven't played it in a 3 to 4-player game, so I can't vouch for those players. I know it plays differently at 3 and 4, but at a 2-player game, that can definitely be a deal breaker. Another thing that I kind of disliked about this game is I always felt like I needed just one more turn to get what I need, and then the game was over. And then for the solo portion of this game, it's kind of wonky where you have all your cards available, and whenever you play those cards for the next round, you can never play those cards for that round. You'll get them back the round after that. So in a 2-player game, and I imagine in 3 and 4, you can play those cards every round, but in the solo you can't, so you really have to strategize and make sure you don't need that card for the next round. So that is Glass Road, everybody. Coming in at number 4 on my list is the newest addition to my board game collection, and I managed to snag a copy for a pretty good price, and that is Mercator, or Mercator, however you want to say it. The good things about this game is that no game is quite the same. So in here, you're trying to complete certain contracts by using resources that you're collecting in different cities, and those contract cards can be different every time you play the game. So that really creates like a replayability factor for this game. I'm primarily a 1 to 2 player game, board gamer, so the solo version of this game is pretty easy. There's like a couple of changes which you can end up implementing in a two-player game, so it's really not that hard to play, honestly, any of his solo games, except Or at Labor. That one's a little weird for me. And it's a dry game. It's kind of themeless, even though you are a traveling merchant trying to create peace among the countries. You don't feel like you're doing that. You're just going here, collecting cubes, and then going there and completing contracts. But for some reason, it's fun. I can't quite describe why, but for some reason, this game is fun. So I guess the cons to this game is that there's a lot of cubes. Whenever you go to a certain city, you have to place out cubes around that city. And I'm the one picking from all the little barrels, putting them in there. And that can get kind of tedious. So if it's your turn and you're sitting there restocking the board, you kind of have this quick pause before you kind of hit your combo, because there's a certain order step that you have to do everything in. And if you don't do that, then it just kind of throws off the turn order. And it's not really the game's fault. It could be, since it's out of print. That's why I would give this a con for that, because you have to pay a hefty price to get this copy, or maybe someone's nice and will just give it to you for a good price. And yeah, that's Mercator for you. Now we're getting into the top three, my three favorite Uwe Rosenberg games. And let me preface by saying that these top three are really hard to put in order. You could honestly just switch them up sometimes depending on whenever I wake up and how I feel. This game's better than the other games. So 1 to 3 is really just one big slab. So here we go. On this particular date, number 3 is going to be Nusfjord, which is a quick game about fishing and feeding your elders. So it is a very fast and easy game, very simple to set up. No game is the same because you have a bunch of different buildings. There's different decks that you can start off with, and there's even expansion decks, which are hard to find, that you can buy that'll add even more replayability to this game. So there's multiple paths to victory, even though this is small and players have the potential to block you, just like in Agricola or Caverna. There's ways around it to where you can still get what you need, but kind of in a roundabout way. I would say the downside to this game is that it's kind of fiddly with the feeding and distributing the fish, feeding your elders in that phase. It can get kind of wonky there. And it is difficult to strategize on this game because of all the buildings that I mentioned. Each time is different. It's not set. So you have to really stare at the board for a little bit and see how you can combo and get what you need to buy the buildings and see if the buildings will even help you out. Sometimes your strategy in your head does not match up with any of the buildings down there, so you feel like you're being forced to go down a certain path. So, and speaking of paths, there is a certain way to play this game. Like in the beginning, of course, you're going to get elders and you're going to build ships. And then midway through, you're going to build buildings. And then towards the end, you're going to focus on the sea building. So there is certain ways to play, even though it's kind of sandbox-ish. There is a certain way to play, and that's kind of what I would say is a downside. But that is Nusfjord. Coming in at number 2 is Hallertau. Hallertau and Nusfjord have been on my channel a couple of times. This is the first game that I've put on this channel. It is a terrible video of me playing a solo game of this. And the reason I love Hallertau so damn much is that it's endless in replayability. And then the card comboing is just cool as hell. If you have the resources that you need to complete that card, you get that card and it could give you another card, and if you have those resources right then and there, bam, you can complete that card, and hey, another card and you completed that. So you can really get a combo going, and then watching that big building just move across the board as you score more and more points. It's just cool. It's a very unique system that he used in this game where there's a tier of workers, and if you need that spot and you go there, the next time you go there, it's going to cost even more workers. So it's kind of a supply and demand that if the space is full, then you can't go there at all. And in the solo game, if you draw a card and it only tells you the pool from certain quadrants, then that space is not going to be emptied at all, and you just flat out cannot go there. Downsides to this game is that it can be kind of hard to strategize because of the card comboing. If you get a bad card draw and you just cannot combo any of those cards together, it can be a really difficult game where you're pretty much playing without any card play. I've even implemented a variant where each type of card, there's 4 of them, kind of have like a belt, whenever you grab one, another one will come out, and then the ones that are further out, you could like pay a resource for it to kind of balance, knowing that you're going to get that card. That's kind of a house rule that I've played with a couple of times, and my score hasn't changed. It just makes me feel like I'm more in control. But still, Hallertau is a fun game, and I'd recommend it to anyone at 1 to 2 players, and I really want to try it at 4 players. So that is Hallertau. Okay, you've made it to my number 1, or you skipped all the way through just to see what my number 1 was. And it's not Agricola, it's not Caverna, it's not Le Havre, it's not Bonanza, and it's not Ora et Labora. It is Fields of Arles. The reason I like Fields of Arles is that it's designed for 1 to 2 players. I primarily play games at 1 to 2 players, and I've noticed with a lot of board games that whenever you play at that player count, things are scaled down, or you have to have some kind of player variant, 1 to 2 player variant, in order to even play some kind of version of the game. Most of his games, you don't really see the full potential of it unless you're at a full player count, which most of his go to 4, some go to 5. This one, 1 to 2 players. I like playing with my wife, primarily in board games. She usually beats me most of the time. I'm a good teacher. This one, you have the entire board for 1 to 2 players. This one is also a sandbox game. Like I mentioned earlier, Feast for Odin is a big sandbox game, but this one, I feel like it just does it better. It kind of ties in the things I did enjoy about Agricola, where you're collecting the resources and then you're building kind of a farm board. And then it also ties in the Newsfjord aspect where you're building ships, but in this one it's carts and wagons. And then you're converting those, kind of going on a trip where you spend your resources to say, oh, I went to this town, so I'm going to get points. There's just multiple paths to victory. And if you see the other player going this route, you can go that route and you're still going to win, because there's no one way to win in this game. Agricola kind of forced you to do a little bit of everything. And then A Feast for Odin is nice and sandboxy, where there is multiple ways. But I feel like you only get 2/3 of the board whenever you're playing with 2 people. And another good thing is that no game is the same, hence the sandbox essence of this game. Some cons, I do have to talk some mess about my favorite game, is that it's kind of labor intensive to set up. If you see my playthrough of this, it takes up the entire table, the whole camera space. I had difficult time getting this all in the frame. So even with a 2-player count, it takes up the entire table. There's a lot of rules overhead. I would say this is probably one of his most complicated games, if not Ora et Labora will be right up there with it. And then the last thing, the feeding and breeding phase of this one is kind of complicated. It's weird that the animals only breed during certain seasons, which I guess I get it, it's thematic, they can only have babies once a year, but on Agricola, it's like every time you had a phase, a harvest phase, they would breed. But this one, the harvest phase is set up between like a spring and then a winter. So that's kind of a hard thing to keep track of. I would accidentally do something when I should have done it in the last phase. But Fields of Arles is my favorite game. I don't think it's going to get trumped by anything anytime soon. It needs a redemption video, as well as Hallertau and Newsfjord with my new recording style that I have going on. So anyone who wants to play Uwe Rosenberg games, I would highly recommend Fields of Arles, because even if you can get your hands on the expansion, then you can play with 3 people. Alright guys, that was my top 5 Uwe Rosenberg games. I hope you enjoyed my list. Leave me a comment and show me your list of favorite Uwe Rosenberg games. I know mine's going to be a lot different than most people's. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.